Speaker, I rise to support the motion from the Premier that rightly and justifiably acknowledges the incredible efforts of the firefighters that took on the catastrophic blazes across the state, but particularly in my patch on the York Peninsula last Wednesday. And as we know, they had to control quite a considerable number of fires on the day. And in doing so, they managed to prevent any loss of life, and which we've already heard in this chamber today at Yorktown was particularly amazing effort. And we congratulate them and thank them sincerely for that. As I said, I'd like to pay particular respect to the firefighters that fought blazes in the electorate of Narungga on Wednesday, and the largest of those was at Yorktown and eventually ended up on the doorstep of Edithburgh with its 61-kilometre perimeter. But there are also, and it's worth acknowledging these two, there are also considerable fires near Price, just north of Ardrossan, and also near Port Wakefield, or I think it's been termed the Beaufort Fire. Mr Deputy Speaker, the fire near Yorktown and Edithburgh destroyed 11 homes, had 33 people injured, burnt out 5,000 or in excess of 5,000 hectares of land, mainly crops which, contrary to how it's going in the rest of the country and some parts of this state were actually bumper crops, had an exceptional year down to the southern end of the York Peninsula this year, and there were some wonderful crops that were just waiting to be repped, but unfortunately that was not meant to be. The fire ripped through quite a considerable amount of them. And there was also extensive loss of livestock, machinery, sheds and vehicles, the full extent of which will only be realised in the coming days and weeks as a full stocktake of what has been lost is realised. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, having been in the fire area on Thursday, and again on Friday with the Premier and the Minister, and again yesterday, it remains absolutely incredible that no one was killed, as I said earlier. Such was the ferocity and the speed of the fire, particularly at Edithburgh, which erupted when the wind change came through early on Thursday morning or late on Wednesday, one or the other. Mr Deputy Speaker, there are incredible stories of families jumping into vehicles and driving through the flames to escape. Residents evacuating to the town tidal pool in the dead of night to shelter from the smoke and heat. Property owners recalling how the fire lapped at their home yard fence, only for CFS or farmers with their water units managing to stop the fire's passage just in time. And one of the sites we visited with the Minister and the Premier, it was just extraordinary to see how the paddock immediately adjacent to the house had been completely burnt out with only charred remains of the wheat crop left on the ground. And the fence itself was tinged with the darkness of the fire which had approached, and somehow, some way, the CFS volunteers had managed to stop the passage of that fire at the fence, at the literal fence of the property. It was absolutely incredible to see, Mr Deputy Speaker. Such is the amazing work that they do in preventing those fires. So, there's also stories of flames jumping roads, and we've already heard about how it jumped the containment line in the dead of the night and the early hours of the morning when the wind shifted. Obviously, I've mentioned killing the livestock and the tractors that we've seen engulfed in flames. But there were, and there's a wonderful story and wonderful footage of the community and a collective cheer that went up when the massive Boeing 737 traversed over and dropped 15,000 litres of fire retardant to protect the Yorktown township. It's a huge plane. The community did two runs, half of the 15,000 one way, and then it came back and did another run with the rest of its load. And the community was literally cheering as it went over. And I drove through there where the Boeing dropped its load there. I drove through it on Thursday, and you can still see where the crops are stained with the pink or red retardant, and there's actually a house that they saved, and it's covered in pink or red retardant. And the crop on the other side of the road is completely burnt out, but that house was saved, and I suspect it was thanks to the Boeing plane that came all the way from New South Wales. So it did its job, and it was a wonderful thing to see and really uplifting for the community in a tough time. Mr Speaker, one Edithburgh resident is quoted as saying that they came from all over to help save our little town. 5:30 in the morning, I'm standing on the jetty, I'm watching the flames licking the top, and I'm getting rained on by ash, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen to our dear town? Such was the threat posed by the fire. As I said, crews from all over the region had fought fires all day and must have been exhausted and well ready for respite when the cool change came through with a change of wind direction. But that was, of course, when the fire flared up, jumped the containment lines and became at its worst, with the wind change sweeping through, swinging the fire towards Edithburgh. The CFS crews and farmers who literally risk life and limb to help others are genuine heroes in my view, Mr Deputy Speaker, genuine heroes, and no words can fully convey how grateful and inspired multiple communities are across the York Peninsula. So amazing was the effort and skill on display by them. There were a number of firefighters treated for heat exhaustion and other injuries, and it is really impressive when these people volunteer, and most of them are volunteers, Mr Speaker. I acknowledge some of the professionals that came down and helped, but the vast majority helped out down at Yorktown were volunteers. They volunteer to put themselves into harm's way to fight dangerous fires and keep people and property safe. There were those residents who were evacuated at Yorketown and at Edithburgh and at Wallbay, as well as Cabowie and at Price, where residents headed for the coastline, as well as at Port Wakefield, where at one point 150 workers who were at Primo were in shutdown and forced to wait for the path to clear before being able to head home to assist their families and friends. Soon relief centres were opened at Stansbury's Bowls Club, Edithburgh RSL and Edithburgh Bowls Clubs, where more volunteers gathered to help those in need, to feed the fireys, offer clothing and emergency supplies for the hundreds in the area that had fled their homes with just pets and the clothes that were on their back. It was really pleasing to stop by the Yorktown Oval, and it's already been mentioned in the Minister's speech, but the level of community support there was outstanding. There was CFS volunteers there having a break, salvos from Kadina that had come up with a truckload full of food and water, every other charitable organisation that you could think of, as well as the layperson, as the Minister said, that had just come along to help of their own accord, of their own volition, and they were there cooking, feeding and doing their best, as well as the ambos that were washing out the eyes of the fireys that had come back from the front line, so to speak. They had their stations set up and were treating those people to make sure that they could have a well-earned break, have a rest and then get back out there and help. Yesterday, Mr Deputy Speaker, a local recovery coordinator was appointed, Ms Deb Richardson, tasked with working with the Yorktown community to identify what assistance is needed and where moving forward. The relief centre that has until now been at Stansbury will today move to Yorktown Town Hall and is open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. for people seeking information about immediate support that has been made available. So far, a total of $13,500 has been granted through 18 personal hardship emergency grants to the community, jointly funded through the Commonwealth State Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangements. As many people continue to sift through layers of black soot in their once homes in regions of charred trees and fence posts, and where farmers face machinery losses alone set to run into the millions of dollars, the community remains supportive and ready to rebuild. With the help of such groups such as Blaze Aid, who are present at a community meeting held yesterday morning, PERS are assisting with livestock recovery, rapid response teams, rural financial counselling services, Lions Australia, which is accepting donations for the cause, members of the Weavers Ag Bureau, locals who have commenced fundraising again of their own volition, among them Wendy Alt, who I stopped in and saw yesterday morning, who set up a Yorktown Fire Relief Fund and coordinated the Yorktown branch of the local police credit union bank for people to make donations. I'll run that tally up in that account and hopefully I've got a sizable amount to contribute where it's needed. And I also want to make special mention of a 7-year-old girl who's actually a neighbour of my parents, who saw the saw the terrible happenings on the news, became really emotionally invested and was driven to do something, and with the help of her parents has set up a GoFundMe page. So it's been really pleasing to see the community come together, and I've made a donation to Amali Ziesh's fundraising page. I look forward to helping her direct that money where it's needed to go, and hopefully she can also contribute a sizable amount. But congratulations to 7-year-old Amali Ziesh for her efforts in fundraising to help the recovery. As I said, we've also got Police Credit Union, and there's also been farm machinery dealers. I think Vader's Machinery have offered a tractor for short-term loan. Rosewarne's Kadina have offered a couple of utes to people that have lost their cars in the fire. So there's plenty of community spirit going on there, plenty of support for those people that need it right at this very moment. Mr Speaker, I also would like to touch ever so briefly on the Pinery Fire. Monday was the 4-year anniversary of the Pinery Fire, which tore through some 85,000 hectares and had some 1,700 firefighters, 90 injuries with 2 lives lost, and $40 million worth of unharvested crop, which was burnt up, and insurance losses in the area of some $75 million. Mr Deputy Speaker, that was a fire that, amongst conditions that haven't been seen since, until perhaps what we saw on Wednesday. And it doesn't seem like 4 years ago, but it is apparently. And on Sunday we joined the Minister at a opening of a memorial near the Grace Plains Church, which is no longer in use, but a memorial that will immortalise the memories of that fire and the terrible tragedy it was that resulted in 2 losses of life. So I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organising committee of Peter March, Derek Tiller and Roger Davies, who did a wonderful job getting all the photos and information organised and converting what was a burnt-out tennis shed into now a memorial or museum, of all the happenings that went on during that Pinery fire. There were some harrowing stories told by the speakers. We had Belinda Kay, who lost her family home. She gave a talk at the memorial opening. We had John Lush gave a talk about the difficult circumstances they faced. Representatives of the two families of people that lost their lives in that fire talking. That was incredibly emotional, Mr. Speaker. It was a crowd, Mr. Deputy Speaker, pardon me. There was a crowd of what I estimate to be about 500 people in attendance, such as the community support and nostalgia that lingers for that particular tragedy. And they had heard incredible stories from the families of those that lost loved ones in that fire, and it drove quite a few people to tears just hearing that. So, wonderful occasion. It was pleasing to see such a wonderful turnout to express the strong community support for those that are still suffering the side effects of that fire 4 years on. It did burn down some 91 homes, so it's taken quite some time to rebuild, but the community is starting to rally together, and it was pleasing to see. That event went off with such aplomb. It was a terrific event to be a part of, and I'm pleased they saw fit to invite me, and look forward to visiting that community and that memorial when it's not so busy, so I can have a proper interrogation of the memorial panels up there. Also, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it has been pleasing. Yesterday morning we had a meeting organised in Yorketown by the Weavers Ag Bureau, where representatives from the Pinery community near Owen and Hamley Bridge came down to share their experiences of the fire with local farmers so that they know what to expect going forward. They're not flying blind. They've got some people with lived experience that have lived through fires in this situation before, who can come down and give them a bit of a plan, order their priorities, help them sort of understand what they'll need to do, what they should be doing first and what they should be prioritising. So really thank Adrian McCabe and Ben Marshman for coming down yesterday morning to Yorktown. They've had to stop harvesting. They're in the middle of their harvest themselves, and they've given up their time to come down. And again, it was a packed room. There was standing room only, such as the community support ongoing for those people that are suffering down at Yorktown. So thank you to Adrian and Ben for coming down and sharing your experiences with fire. Really well appreciated. I talked to quite a number of farmers on the way out who found it quite an invaluable experience. And also well done to the Weavers Ag Bureau, who are, with their chair, Marty Collins, are doing a mountain of work in organising and facilitating sponsorship, charity and donations. So there'll be a lot of work for them to do in the future, trying to support their farmers that have lost their crops and are faced losing their topsoil with sand drift and that sort of stuff. But they're in a good position, a wonderful community, and well done to Adrian, Ben and also to Marty for organising all of that. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'd like to once again commend the motion and again convey on behalf of the Narungga constituents a massive thank you to all of our volunteer firefighters and state emergency service workers, our SAPOL officers, council personnel and everybody in the community who helped out and who are continuing to help out as we move forward. Reportedly last week there were some 600 CFS volunteers who fought 65 fires across the state, including 350 locally on the York Peninsula during the catastrophic conditions. If it wasn't for all of you, the devastation of last Wednesday would be far worse for so many more people. Thank you on behalf of all the people in Narungga, and I commend the motion to the House.